Hey everybody, Jake here for American Muscle, and in this video we're taking a look at the Pipes H-Bomb Catback exhaust with polished tips, fitting 2024 and newer Mustang GT Fastbacks without the active exhaust. If you're after that classic muscle car sound and some more low-down grunt, then this setup from Pipes is going to be exactly what you're looking for. Featuring a classic look and a deep guttural exhaust note for one of the lowest prices in the segment, the Pipes H-Bomb exhaust has a little bit of everything that you want. And as you heard from the clips at the beginning of the video, this setup is loud enough to get a very strong 4 out of 5 on our loudness meter. Now this is not entirely unhinged, it's not quite a full-on straight pipe, but there's not going to be any mistaking that you've got something going on underneath your car once you fire it up. Now I've said it plenty of times before, but I really don't think there's anybody out there who could make me a convincing argument that the Coyote V8 doesn't sound good, even in its stock form. It's impossible to not enjoy the exhaust note of that engine. But for as good as it sounds in all of its forms, some of you might want a little bit more, or a lot more, as the case might be. And especially if your car has the standard non-active exhaust from the factory, you probably find yourself wanting more volume out of it. It's a little more subdued than I think some of us might like. But fear not, volume is not going to be the issue here. And from the moment you fire your Mustang up once you've got this installed, you're going to hear a huge difference. This makes the Mustang sound like a proper muscle car. And this setup in particular with the included H-pipe gives it a bit more of that deep old school tone, more akin to what you'd hear coming out of Steve McQueen's 68 GT and Bullitt, or a car that's lumping its way to the starting line on a drag strip. And most of that sound, of course, is going to come courtesy of the M80 Bullitt-style Violator series mufflers included in the kit right here. Now these come already installed on this mid-pipe basically, and while other manufacturers claim to have straight-through mufflers that aren't necessarily that, Pipe sticks pretty true to it, as you can see right there. These are essentially just straight-through Bullitt-style mufflers with very little baffling, so you get to enjoy all of the glorious V8 noises. Now since this is a full catback, it is going to completely replace your factory mufflers and resonators, but it will still retain your factory catalytic converters. Now of course, inside the cabin, this is also going to be much louder than your stock setup, so plan on having to turn up your radio or speak a little bit louder to your passengers. However, the real trick in this one is the H-pipe that's included. Now while I mentioned it earlier in the video, it is worth discussing further, because the H-pipe has quite a few big benefits. First of all, this is going to help combat drone by allowing exhaust gas pulses to intermingle. Instead of each side of the exhaust being separate all the way through or forcing everything together through a constrictive Y-pipe, the H-pipe here allows for a nice smooth crossover. And that crossover early in the system helps create a bit of a vacuum. Now that's going to help reduce exhaust back pressure and pull some exhaust gases through. And again, it's going to allow those varying pulses to meld together, which is where we get that nice tone and the lack of drone. And that's the most important part here. But the other benefit is that since H-pipes also allow for more flow, they can help create some more power. Now unlike an X-pipe though, these tend to make more power down low in the rev range, and that's going to be perfect for driving around town or for your daily commute. It's a great complement to the high revving nature of the Coyote V8. Since that engine thrives so much up high, getting a little bit more grunt down low is going to be a good thing. Plus, you still get an awesome sound and more without the literal headache. Now this same system is also available in a configuration that includes an X-pipe if you're after more power up high in the rev range, or if you prefer that higher pitched GT350-like tone from your exhaust. But either way you slice it, you really can't go wrong here. And of course, I want to talk briefly about the tips, since that's the part that everybody's going to see. And the whole thing here is capped off with a pair of polished /cut 4-inch round tips exiting in your stock location. Though it's not quite the biggest change versus stock, you've still got something that's going to tip people off. These have the Pipes logo embossed on the sides here, and I think they really evoke that classic muscle car look and feel. It pairs quite well with the sound profile, especially in this particular configuration. Now you can also get this set up with black tips if you want that more stealthy appearance, or if you're going for that full blackout thing with your build, and that is available on our site as well, should you want to go that route. The system is constructed from 3-inch mandrel bent 409 grade stainless steel, where your tips are going to be a dual wall T304 stainless. Being 409 grade stainless steel means that this is going to have pretty good resistance to rust and corrosion. So if you live in an area where there's salt or a lot of moisture, this is going to last you quite some time. Now this is not the highest grade material, but it is still going to last you a while, and everything is put together nicely here, as we come to expect from pipe setups. All the welds look nice, everything is clearly put together well, and it just means that you're going to save a bit of money versus a fully T304 stainless setup. Speaking of which, pricing for this one is going to come in at about $725, which makes it a reasonably affordable option for the S650. In fact, it's one of the most affordable catbacks on the market for these cars thus far. And given the sound and all the other good stuff that's baked in here, this is certainly worth your money. Installation is going to get a 2 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, and the job should take you around 2 hours to complete. Pretty much standard stuff for an exhaust. Everything you need is included in the kit. You get all the clamps and such that you need to put everything together, and the system is going to utilize all your factory exhaust hanger locations, so you don't need to modify anything on the car itself. And to show you the process now, let's head on out to the shop.
The tools you'll need for this project are an impact gun, a ratchet, a long extension, a 13 and a 15 millimeter socket, a rubber mallet, an exhaust hanger removal tool, and a short pry bar. Hi everyone, today we're installing an exhaust on our Mustang, so let's get started by watching a short video on how to uninstall the stock exhaust.
So the first thing we're going to do is come to the double flange behind our cat. We have 4 15 millimeter bolts that we can loosen up with a 15 millimeter socket. Now we're going to leave this just like that for now as we work on the rest. One thing to keep in mind is when we go to pull this off, this little hook is keeping this on, so you're going to have to get a flathead screwdriver to pull back on that on both sides when we go to remove it. Next we can come right behind our rear diff to this hanger. There's one on each side of this bracket. There's a 13 millimeter bolt holding it on. So I've got a 13 millimeter swivel socket on an extension to pop this off. And now we'll just come to the other side and do the same exact thing. And now with them both removed, you can push up to get those hangers off the hooks. And do that same thing on the other side. Now, last thing we need to do before we can remove this is remove these 2 bolts that were on the inside of those 2 hangers behind the rear diff. So I'm using that same 13 millimeter socket with an extension. Now with those removed, we can push it up off the hook and pull that down to get the clearance we need. So now I've got myself a buddy to support the weight of the rear of the exhaust while I work on the front. We're going to push this towards the rear to disconnect these 2 pipes, and then we can pull it forward to pull it out of the back hangers. So now with our exhaust removed, we can take an exhaust hanger remover tool to pop off these 2 hangers, because we will have to reuse them for our new exhaust. Now, last thing we need to pop off is our 2 clamps that are at the front of the exhaust. You can take a rubber mallet and get the edge of a pry bar on the edge of the clamp to tap these off.
All right, with our stock exhaust out of the way, first thing we're going to do is install these adapter pipes to go from the stock exhaust size to the 3-inch pipes exhaust size. So we're just going to reuse the clamps that we took off of the exhaust system for the front. insert our adapter pipe inside, and then slip it into place. Do the same thing for the other side. And now we can go ahead and tighten up these first two clamps with our 15mm socket. All right, now we're going to go ahead and slide a couple of our clamps onto the inlet side of our H-pipe, making sure, of course, that the support rod on the end of the mufflers is going to be on the bottom, not on the top. And then we'll go ahead and slip these over our adapter pipes. Now we're just going to snug our clamps up right now to allow for future adjustment once we get the rest of the system installed. So you want to make sure that the clamp is all the way at the end of your pipe, and then we'll just snug it up with our 15mm socket. All right, now we can slip a clamp over the outlet of our muffler, and then we'll transfer the hanger from our stock system to our new pipe. And then we'll slide our pipe into the muffler on the driver's side. Now we'll snug up our clamp with our 15mm socket. All right, now we're going to install one of our 13mm bolts for the hanger, just to hold it in place. And we'll tighten that up later. Now we go ahead and slide a clamp over our exhaust pipe, and then we'll take our hanger, slide it into the rear isolator, and then we'll slide our pipe over our exhaust pipe. All right, once you've got that fully seated, we can go ahead and snug up our clamp with our 15mm socket. All right, now we're going to slide a clamp over the end of our driver's side muffler, and then we'll transfer over the hanger from our stock system, and then slip our pipe into the end of the muffler. Now we can hang our hanger back in its original position. And we'll go ahead and snug up our clamp. All right, now we can go ahead and install our tip, and we'll tighten that up using our ratchet and a 15mm socket because it's a little tight to get our gun up inside here. All right, it's a little tough to get the camera up in here, so we'll just go ahead and tighten this up. And now you can repeat the process of installing the two pipes after the muffler and the exhaust tip for the passenger side. Now that we've got our system completely installed, we can recommend starting from the front and make sure that your alignment is all correct. Make sure you've got your tips where you want them to be. Make sure that there's no interference between your exhaust system and any hoses or wiring or the frame or suspension, anything like that. And then go ahead and tighten everything down. Get it to the point where you're ready to actually start it up. But before you start it up, let's go ahead and install the last two bolts for our cover back here and tighten up the two bolts for the hangers behind the diff. And then once we get that done, I do recommend that you go through the entire system with a clean cloth and some rubbing alcohol and just wipe down the entire system, especially any polished parts. That way when you fire it up, there's no grease or dirt or oil on it, and it won't burn into the system and discolor it. Now we'll tighten them down with a 13mm socket.
That's going to wrap it up here for our review and install the Pipes H-Bomb catback exhaust with polished tips, fitting 2024 and newer Mustang GT Fastbacks without the active exhaust. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, for all things Mustang, be sure to keep it right here at AmericanMuscle.com.